It was a quiet evening when I found myself sitting on a park bench, lost in thought. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves around me, and people passed by, wrapped up in their own worlds. But as peaceful as it seemed on the outside, inside me a storm raged. A storm of desire, temptation, and lust. We've all been there, haven't we? That overwhelming feeling when your mind gets hijacked by a single thought, a single image, or even a single person. And suddenly it feels like nothing else matters. Lust has a way of clouding our minds and distorting our perceptions, but it doesn't have to control us. Today, we're going to dive deep into how to control lustful feelings, using a powerful story that many can relate to. It's a story of inner strength, and by the end of it, you'll understand not just how to control lust, but how to take back control of your life. The encounter. Let me tell you about a man named David. He was like anyone else, ambitious, driven, and full of potential. David had always been someone who thrived on discipline and routine. His days were structured, his goals were clear, and his work ethic was unshakable. But, like most people, David had his own inner battles to fight. One day, while scrolling through social media during a break, David came across a post that instantly caught his attention. The image was alluring, enticing, and before he knew it, his thoughts had spiraled into a web of lustful fantasies. It wasn't the first time this had happened. He had experienced this before. A sudden wave of desire that clouded his judgment and pulled him into a cycle of indulgence and regret. But this time, David made a decision. He didn't want to be controlled by his impulses anymore. He wanted to be in control of his own mind, his own actions, and his own future. And so, his journey to master his lust began. Step 1. Acknowledging the problem. The first step in David's journey was acknowledgement. Many people try to suppress their feelings of lust or deny that they even exist, thinking that if they ignore them long enough, they will disappear. But the reality is, the more you suppress something, the more power it gains over you. Lust is a natural human feeling, and there's no shame in acknowledging that it exists. David realized this. He understood that in order to overcome this challenge, he had to be honest with himself. Lust wasn't an external force acting upon him. It was a part of him, a part of his nature that he needed to understand and manage. By acknowledging his feelings, David took the first major step towards gaining control. He started to journal about his experiences, writing down the moments when lust took over his thoughts and how it made him feel. This simple act of putting thoughts into words helped him understand that these feelings were fleeting. They came and went like passing clouds. But only if he was aware of them could he prevent them from turning into a storm. Step 2. The power of mindfulness. David's next step was to practice mindfulness. He had heard about the concept of being present in the moment and decided to give it a try. The idea was simple. Instead of allowing his mind to wander into fantasies or dwell on desires, he would train himself to focus on the present moment. Whether he was working, exercising, or simply relaxing, David would gently remind himself to stay in the now. At first, it was difficult. His mind would drift, and he would catch himself lost in thought. But instead of being hard on himself, David would acknowledge the distraction, bring his focus back, and continue with whatever he was doing. Over time, this practice became easier. He found that the more present he was in his day-to-day activities, the less room there was for lustful thoughts to take over. His mind became a tool he could control rather than a playground for fleeting desires. Step 3. Identifying triggers. A crucial part of David's journey was learning to identify his triggers. Every person has specific things that can set off a cascade of lustful thoughts. Whether it's certain types of media, people, situations, or even feelings, like boredom or stress. David made it his mission to figure out what his triggers were. He started by paying attention to his surroundings and circumstances every time he felt a strong wave of lust. Was it late at night when he was scrolling through social media? Was it after a stressful day at work when he felt the need to escape? Or was it a particular place or person that made his mind race? Once he began identifying these triggers, David realized something profound. Lust wasn't the root of his problem, but rather a symptom. It was his body's way of seeking relief from stress, loneliness, or boredom. With this new understanding, David made a conscious effort to limit his exposure to these triggers. He unfollowed certain social media accounts, changed his routine to avoid moments of boredom, and developed healthier outlets for stress, like exercise and creative hobbies. Step 4. Developing self-discipline. Lust is powerful, but self-discipline is stronger. David knew that in order to truly master his desires, he needed to build his self-discipline muscle. Self-discipline isn't about deprivation. It's about empowering yourself to make choices that align with your values and long-term goals. David began to see self-discipline not as a punishment, but as an act of self-love. To strengthen his self-discipline, David set small, achievable goals for himself. He started with simple challenges, like avoiding lustful content for a single day. Then he gradually extended that goal to a week, then a month. Each time he succeeded, his confidence grew, and the grip that lust had on him weakened. But self-discipline isn't just about avoiding temptations. It's also about cultivating positive habits that fill the void. David replaced his mindless scrolling with reading, learning, and engaging in activities that fueled his personal growth. He realized that when he filled his time with meaningful pursuits, there was less room for distractions like lust. Step 5. Channeling energy into positive outlets. One of the most transformative lessons David learned was that lustful energy, if not channeled properly, can build up and cause frustration. But that same energy, when redirected, can be used to fuel creativity, passion, and productivity. David took up running, something he had always wanted to do but never found the time for. Every time he felt that familiar surge of desire, he laced up his shoes and hit the pavement. The physical exertion not only helped him release pent-up energy, but also gave him a sense of accomplishment and clarity. He also poured himself into his work and personal projects. Every time lust threatened to distract him, he channeled that energy into his goals. It wasn't easy, but over time, David realized that lust didn't have to be an enemy. It could be a motivator. It was all about how he chose to use it. Step 6. Building a support system. David's journey wasn't one he walked alone. He found that sharing his struggles with a trusted friend made a world of difference. There's power in vulnerability, and by opening up about his challenges, David discovered that he wasn't the only one fighting this battle. Many of his friends had similar experiences and were eager to offer advice, support, and encouragement. If there's one thing David learned, it's that no one has to face their struggles alone. Whether it's a close friend, a mentor, or even a professional, having someone to talk to can help keep you accountable and grounded. David found that simply having someone to check in with made it easier to stay committed to his goals. Step 7. Practicing self-compassion. Perhaps the most important lesson of all was self-compassion. David realized that no one is perfect, and slip-ups are a part of the process. There were days when he fell back into old patterns, and for a moment, it felt like all his progress had been lost. But instead of beating himself up, David learned to forgive himself and move forward. Lust is a natural feeling, and the goal isn't to eliminate it entirely, but to manage it in a way that aligns with your values. David learned that every setback was an opportunity for growth. Each time he stumbled, he picked himself back up, dusted himself off, and continued on his journey. Conclusion. By the end of his journey, David had transformed. He was no longer a slave to his impulses. He was in control of his desires. The key, he realized, wasn't in suppressing his feelings, but in understanding them, acknowledging them, and channeling them in ways that served his greater purpose. And so, the next time you find yourself overwhelmed by lustful thoughts, remember David's story. Acknowledge the feeling, don't judge yourself for it, and take back control of your mind. With mindfulness, self-discipline, and a little compassion, you can transform your relationship with desire and live a life that's not controlled by fleeting urges, but guided by your highest intentions. Remember, mastering your desires is not about depriving yourself of joy. It's about reclaiming your power and living a life that's true to who you really are.